So, how are you doing today?
I'm good.
Great. If you could just introduce yourself and where are you from?
Sure. My name is Linda Addison. I'm originally from Philadelphia, and then after high school I went to college and moved to New York, where I've been for 40 years, probably 30 years. And I just moved to Tucson about a year and a half ago.
Oh, great. Now, what is your, at your university, what do you teach? What's your concentration?
Well, I'm actually the writer.
Oh, great, great.
I know Professor, well, I call her Kenitra.
Right.
I'm saying her name's wrong. She's
No,
gonna
no, you're
slap
not.
me. I know her because I met her at a World Horror Conference because of the project she's doing on interviewing black women in horror. So that's how I know her.
Great, and you're a horror person.
I am. I write basically poetry and short stories. I'm the first African American to win the HWA Bram Stoker Award.
Oh, wow.
And I've won 4.
That's amazing.
Thank you. And right now I'm currently working on a science fiction novel series.
Oh, great. And where can people find your work online so we can, give you some publicity?
Sure, I'm always up for that.
Right.
I was actually one day thinking of changing my name to Linda by my book Addison. So you can go to my site, which is Linda Addison Poet, one word, or just look up Linda Addison. There's 2 of us. One is a lawyer who does not look like me, and then there's me. But my books are on Amazon, the Apple bookstore, so they're all over.
And who have been some of your influences? Who are the people, and especially current, who are people you're reading right now that you enjoy?
Now, that's always not the easiest question, because now that I'm working on this novel series, I don't have as much time to read as I want.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is when I go to conferences, this is a conference on more of a university kind of seminar conference, but I go to a lot of horror and science fiction conferences, and I buy people's books there and read. So I will say one of the most interesting books that I got last year is a book by Jeff Carroll called It Happened on Negro Mountain, which I've never heard of. Mm-hmm. And he was wearing a t-shirt, It Happened on Negro Mountain. I was like, oh my God, I need that shirt. And there's also some wonderful short story collections, which is what I do have time for now, that came out. And again, I wasn't prepared to give you names.
That's right. Do you work primarily, or what do you prefer more working with? Is like the novel form or short story, or?
Well, the novel's new form for me.
Okay.
My first voice is poetry.
Oh, great.
And so I've published over 300 poems and collections, and I've done a lot of short stories, and this is really a new thing for me, doing the novel. So it's been a learning experience writing something this
Well,
long.
what are some of the hurdles that you've had with the novel?
For me, for many years, there was just a sense of fear. I was afraid to start a novel because I thought I wouldn't finish it. It seemed like a long journey to go on that I was not used to. And a couple years ago at one of the World Horror Conventions, I had a conversation with 2 gentlemen who were being given a Lifetime Achievement Award. One's Joe Lansdale, who's a big publisher of novels and has won a lot of awards.
Nacogdoches, Texas, right? I believe.
Yes, he's from Texas. Amazing writer. And the other author was Rick Hautala, who was winning the Lifetime Achievement Award. He unfortunately passed away a couple years ago. But I knew both of these writers from seeing them at many conventions, and they sat down and had a talk with me that literally got rid of my fear and made me decide to go ahead and just jump in. And one is, they told me that, they said, well, Linda, you know how to write a short story? I said, yes. They said, well, just write each chapter like a short story. And that was a huge enlightenment for me, because it allowed me to think, okay, like building the China Wall, one brick at a time. And one of the other things that I've had to work with in the last year as I'm working on this novel is that I found that I had a tendency to over-edit. Because I know the story, I'm actually rewriting the novel. It's something that I've had written over the years. And this novel is based on a story that was published in the first Dark Matter anthology. And So I had a tendency to over-edit, and I would go back and become very dissatisfied with what I was writing, and I know better because that's how I've always been. I just write. I don't care how bad it is, and it's all gotten better in rewrite. So I've had to pull myself back onto editing and pull myself back on wanting to rewrite and just concentrate on finishing, which I do know is the actual way to being published for anybody. Is you got to begin the story, then you got to end the story, and then you can go back and rewrite it.
I really appreciate the idea of treating chapters as short stories.
It's miraculous.
It feels like you perhaps get very strong chapters then, that can like maybe even exist on their own, right? Outside of that. Do you feel like that kind of approach ends up maybe giving your work the feeling of a story cycle at times, or do you worry about continuity, where every chapter is so strong in that way, where it feels, I feel that sometimes ends up, there's a continuity type thing where you have to work at maybe, or...
Well, one of the things, I did bring this up with Joe Lansdale because I was also concerned with that, and actually in reading his work I see this to be true, and that is, he said don't worry about continuity, don't worry about the rules that you've been given about writing, in that every scene has to move the story forward, and every scene has to open the character out more. He says you can have a whole chapter that's mood, which if you read him, he does beautifully. He said just write each chapter as you need to write it. And then the rewrite is where you go back through and decide whether or not there is something there. And so I was very happy with that, because as a poet, when I write poetry, often it's not so much that I'm telling an entire story, although I'd like to think my poetry does that. Sometimes I'm writing poetry to instill a feeling,
right,
to try to get an emotion. And out of that emotion, the reader is going to fill in the story of their life or whatever they need to put in. So I actually had to make some adjustments with that also. It's just to just let that chapter be what it is from beginning to end. Beginning, middle, end. Beginning, middle, end. And then when it's finished, I will go through and see how relevant it is. And in fact, the story that was published in Dark Matter, the first one, which got, like I said, very good reviews, I pulled that out of the first draft of that book that I was working on.
Oh, wow.
And it worked very well as a story.
You mentioned some of the advice that you've gotten from authors. What's some advice that you have that, for young, aspiring writers?
I have had the blessed opportunity to speak on many panels to young writers, and I've done a couple workshops. Biggest important thing is just begin it and end it. And I used to consider myself the queen of the worst drafts ever. Like sometimes I would literally write a story where I didn't even give the characters names because I just wanted to get the story done. So I would be like M1 for male, F1 for female, and sometimes I knew something had to happen but I wasn't sure, but I wanted to get to the end, so I put like a box and say something bad happens here and keep moving. So I think it's really important to get to the end of the story. Because it's not in rewriting that people are not publishing and stop from writing, it's in finishing. So that's really the most important thing. It's just get it out, and then go back and make sense out of it, fix the edits up, the English, the emotional through line for the characters. But
that's fantastic. That's like what Borges says about with his writing, the inspiration provides him the beginning and the end. The work is everything in the middle.
Truly,
yes.
Truly.
What are your impressions so far about the symposium?
Well, this is the first time I've attended. I wanted to go, but last year I wasn't able to. I went to one yesterday on Sun Ra, and I was literally done. I was done. Like, I was full. I was writing poetry. I was writing things I needed to go look up. I mean, it's amazing to be able to sit in these panels and listen to people who have made these studies of things where they can literally quote, it's not just an emotional reaction, not that there's anything wrong with that because I'm a poet. That's what I write from, is emotion. Although I've written science fiction poetry where I've written from real science, but I find it so amazing that people have such a depth of knowledge here, and it's just, I just keep writing stuff down to go to later. It's really exciting.
Great, so I'm sure that we expect you at the symposiums year after year
No
at this
doubt.
point.
No
That's
doubt.
great. Is there anything specifically that you've heard at this symposium that you're going to either approach in your own writing, or something that just really resonated so far?
Well, the Sun Ra thing really took me to another level.
It was fantastic.
Yeah, because I have, and I don't talk about this much, although I'm working on the concept of a couple nonfiction books about my basic approach to life as a human being on this planet. And I always was so attracted to the concept of Sun Ra because I do feel on some level we all carry a certain divinity inside of us that is alien, that is outside of the flesh that we live in. And to be able, and that's where I feel like often I'm writing from anyway. So I was just like totally jazzed over that. See a whole series of Sun Ra poems coming and being from another planet. But, you know, I've always conceived that I was kind of, didn't fit in ever. So it really rang true for me.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we really appreciate your time here, to taking the time to speak to us.
My pleasure.
Is there any last words, anything that's you'd like to say about this experience?
As if you wouldn't know by looking at me, just to tell each and every single person, don't be afraid to be you.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.